today, instead of like just sharing a failure story, which I will, and it will actually be the first time I'm sharing this story in public, it's a little bit of a paradox, I will tell you a little bit more about Fuckup Nights. I think it would be interesting so you have a little bit of background on how it all started and how it's seen through headquarters. Can you lift your hands if you've ever been in a love relationship? Come on, don't be shy. And can you lift your hands if you've only been with one person, like in just one relationship in your life, and you're still with the same person today? Congratulations. So the thing is that in business, something really similar happens, and up to 90% of startups fail before they reach 2 years. So when we have like these stats, like we're gonna fail in love and we're gonna fail in business, what should we do? My mom told me an advice, which is marry someone with money. And I didn't. So what is Fuckup Nights? Fuckup Nights is like a global movement dedicated to share stories of business and professional failure. And I like to use this image to kind of express, wow. Woo. Cool. I love these effects. Yes, in the first image we can see like how companies want to project themselves, how everyone is expected to behave in companies, and the general impression people have from any kind of business person or companies around the world. But in reality, a lot of companies have situations like in the second image, small companies and the largest companies in the world, but we very rarely talk about these situations, like the less glamorous experiences when it comes to business. And at Fuckup Nights, we find it interesting to talk just about these stories. And it all started when the 5 co-founders were having tequilas, like all the best stories start with tequila, or the worst stories. And cheers. And they started getting a little bit tipsy and a little bit vulnerable. And they realized, they started to talk about their own business and professional failures. They had like this cathartic moment, and they realized that even though they were very good friends, they didn't know that each of them had failed at something. And they said, wow, that's very weird, but it's been like magical, therapeutic. Why don't we kind of replicate this super frank and natural conversation, but in a room full of strangers, where 3 speakers can jump on stage and share their fuck-ups? They met the day after to see if they were talking or the tequila was talking. And they all agreed that it was a great idea, and they started the first Fuckup Night ever in September 2012. And since then, the movement has evolved to more than 300 cities in 80 countries around the world. And what is the Failure Institute? So the Failure Institute is the research arm of Fuckup Nights. And it all started when someone asked us, hey, you guys that attend so many events about business failure, could you tell us why companies fail in Mexico? What are the most common reasons? And we had no idea. We felt like, so we're just drinking beer, hearing stories, having a laugh, but are we wasting all that information? So we felt a little bit curious and guilty, and we decided to study those reasons. But before, what we just had were notions, like we heard a lot of people failing because they signed the wrong contracts or because they didn't sign a contract. Then it was a very common thing to have people failing because they were launching too early, before their product or service was ready, or when they had certain budget, they needed to commit to a deadline, and they got smashed like my friend here. Or like it was very, very, very common to hear about stories where the co-founders, the business partners had troubles and they didn't get along. And as I said, those were like super common stories. We heard them all the time, but they weren't, that wasn't a data-driven answer. So we said, let's really study the common reasons of business failure in Mexico. Let's publish them in a book, which is called the Fvckup book. And it's translated into Georgian, and it's just out there, and I'm super excited about that. And the book was a great success for several reasons. Like, the first one was because it was free, so we ran out of copies like in one day. but also a lot of business incubators and accelerators, governments, development banks, academia, approached us and asked us if we could replicate that study, but in a different industry, in a different country, focused on a specific gender, etc. And that's how the Failure Institute was born and materialized as the research arm of Fuckup Nights. And one of our most ambitious projects is the Global Failure Index, which is an interactive map and actually the largest data platform of cases of failure, where you can zoom in into any country in the world and see how companies are failing there. If they receive public investment or private investment, you can filter by industry, by gender, by age, and as you zoom in as close as to a street, all the data changes together with the filters. But what is failure anyways? There might be as many definitions of failure as people are in this room. For most of the people, failure is the opposite of success. But then what is success? Is it having an expensive sports car? Is it a house in the beach? Is it having the job you ever dreamed of, even though you have to work 90 hours a week? Is it traveling and spending time with your family? And is the opposite of that failure? Then probably not necessarily. But what we know is that failure is universal, that no matter how hard you try to avoid it, shit happens. So we better get a little bit comfortable with it. And in fact, we're born failing constantly while we're trying to walk, when we're trying to socialize, when we're trying to swallow water, soup, food, whatever. But we're born resilient. However, as we grow up, we kind of try to put those bad experiences under the drawer because it's something uncomfortable and it's way easier to throw it away than actually sticking to it. And that's, in my point of view, the opposite of what we have to do. If we suffered already the consequences, then why not taking some time to analyze it and see if we can learn something? Good news is that failure is dynamic, same as success, actually. So you're not going to be a failure forever. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to not be a failure forever. And in the same way, we're not going to be successful forever. And actually, being successful for the sake of being successful is quite a poor target. And we are, like business, like our personal lives, there are just an endless queue full of ups and downs. And what we need to do is kind of get comfortable with failure, at least, and then try to control failure in small environments where we can learn from it without spending billions. And I have another question for you. Do you think we should celebrate failure? Can you lift your hands if you think we should celebrate failure? Okay, she said depends, right? And I completely agree. I think the answer is yes and no. I'm not sure if I would celebrate it here. Thing is, like, it also depends. It also depends. He was drinking a bottle of whiskey while he was driving. No, I'm netting up. Yes, exactly. So the thing is that we shouldn't be celebrating failure when it's caused by lack of due diligence, by lack of professionalism, by wanting to step up over our colleagues for our own benefits, etc. But I think we should celebrate failure and even reward it when we're trying to innovate. Because failure may lead to innovation, sometimes in purpose and sometimes by accident. Have you guys ever seen this logo? Do you know what it is? So that's Google X. It's kind of an almost secret department of Google, where it's not even in like the headquarter offices. And the people working in this department, they have a job, which is kill the projects they've been working on. So basically, they wake up every day, they go to work, and it's like, this is an amazing project. How can I make it fail? And they make it fail, and they're happy because that's what they get paid for. But if they don't manage to making it fail, they are even happier because that means that crazy idea might be feasible. And they've been like through projects like very nice. One, for instance, was like a vertical growth system that intended to end hunger in poverty regions. And this failed because they couldn't grow cereals on a vertical way. However, they had this crazy project which was like helium balloons that orbited the Earth pushed by currents of air while providing signals of free Wi-Fi. And it sounds like a stupid idea, but we currently have those balloons like providing with Wi-Fi to remote regions. And another example is this one from the Jacuzzi brothers. One of the brothers had arthritis, this disease, and he was kind of not feeling really good, like any person that has this. And they were building engines for the airplane industry. And I don't know how they came up, probably it was another night of tequilas, but they stuck one of those airplane engines into a bath tube, it made bubbles, he jumped in and he felt like it really cured him, like it was a very nice therapy. So they tried to sell this to people with the same problem, and they dramatically failed because no one had the budget to buy an engine for an airplane to stick it at home. And then they said, okay, why not, let's try to sell it to hospitals. They might be able to sell more insurance to patients with the disease, and no one saw the investment on the health industry. But it felt good, like we have to do something with it. So then they pivoted and they tried to position it as a luxury thing, a luxury product for a luxury market, and this is how Jacuzzi was born and spread out, and now all of us have one at our apartment. No, not really. And another super famous example is Post-it, which is just interesting. They were trying to make one of the strongest adhesives for the aerospace industry, and they came up with one of the weakest adhesives in the world. So that investigation, that research dramatically failed, and they put this like useless product in a drawer for 10 years until there was a change of management in that lab. And someone found something curious about this glue. It was strong enough to hold something in a wall. You could reuse it. It wasn't just a one-off thing, and that it didn't leave any marks in the wall. So they invented this format. So after 10 years, they launched this product, and no one bought it. Like no one had an idea of what to do with a yellow piece of paper. And it was yellow because they just had a warehouse that recycled paper, and it came this way, so it was like kind of handy. Until they gave away all the stock, pretty much, to see if people playing with it could actually make something with that product, and people understood it, and today we have it pretty much everywhere, like in all the governments, in all the universities, in all the offices around the world. And as I said before, there are millions of definitions of failure, and it's a little bit of a state of mind. For instance, what it is failure for me today might not even be seen as failure tomorrow. And there is a psychologist called Carol Dweck from Stanford University that came up with these two concepts, growth mindset and fixed mindset. And she came up with this because she started doing experiments with kids, and she started putting those kids outside of their comfort zones and see how they reacted. And then she started running those experiments with older people, and the results were exactly the same. Some people reacted with a fixed mindset, and some people reacted with a growth mindset. And people with a growth mindset, they believe they are born with certain skills, certain abilities, and they believe, though, that they can work and improve those skills they have, or even develop new abilities. They like to be challenged. They like to be put out of their comfort zone because they see failure as a lesson learned. And those people see the success of others as something inspiring, and they always love to be outside of their regular day-to-day things. Whereas people with a fixed mindset, the same way they believe they are born with certain skills, but no matter how hard they try to improve those skills, they won't be able to improve them, and there's no way they will manage to acquire new skills. So if you're good at soccer, you're good. If you're not good at soccer, don't even try. So they basically stick to what they know, and they see success of others as, meh, I can do it if it was my skill. And they see feedback as criticism, not as something constructive. So basically they stick to what they know, and when they fail at what they know, they are super zero tolerant to frustration. They get extremely frustrated because they don't understand why. And we all either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, and not necessarily just one or another, depending on the role we're playing in our lives. Probably at our family roles, we have a growth mindset, at a work, a fixed mindset. So it's an interesting exercise that I recommend you doing. Like whenever you're facing a challenge and you're feeling a little bit anxious or exhausted or upset, think what kind of mindset you're approaching this challenge with, and you will be surprised of how many times we all use like a fixed mindset unnecessarily. And if I had to take like 3 things when it comes to like facing failure, one is resilience, is this capacity to stand up after falling down. And that's kind of a muscle we need to train. We're resilient when we're born and when we grow up, but then we start like kind of forgetting about it. And that's something we need to train ourselves to be resilient. And some companies are starting to do idea labs, like in the Google X example I shared with you, but not necessarily for the sake of creating new revenue streams, new products, new ideas, but for the sake of making their employees comfortable with failure and making them resilient. The other one is pivoting. Pivoting is nice because it's recycling, basically. You already did this amount of work. It didn't work out. What can you do with it? You can throw it to the bin, or you can try to make up something new. And pivoting is normally seen as product, like the Post-it example. They changed completely their product. They didn't use it for the airspace industry. Well, maybe they do now. Pivoting can be seen as target audience, marketing, etc., change of strategy. And I like to see pivoting as well as human capital. Like, we're not going to be absolutely happy on our roles at our work for the rest of our lives, and that doesn't mean we're not valuable for the company or that the company doesn't fit us. We might need just a change, more responsibility, less responsibility, and through a management level, this is very important as well, because not only it's cheaper maintaining human capital internally than firing and hiring, but it also creates a culture of inclusion, and people know that actually you're going to count on them before going externally to look for replacements. And the last thing I think is important is learning. It's a little bit of a cliche, saying like the failure is the best teacher, but it's true. Being successful is kind of a heavy formula with a lot of variables that you don't really know why it works. It's kind of a little miracle. However, when we fail, it's very easy to identify what went wrong, which variables we have control on, which variables we don't have control on. So it's a great exercise to come back and analyze our failures, because it will get us a step further to wherever we want to achieve. And that doesn't mean we're not going to fail again, because we certainly will. And like we like to say, Fuckup Nights, failure sucks, but instructs. So let's listen a little bit to our own failures and make the most of them. When I get invited to speak about Fuckup Nights, I like to share the stories of failure we had at Fuckup Nights, because we had billions. Some of them are quite big, some of them not so much, and they're really funny. But today, for the first time, I'm speaking in public about a personal story. And it all started when I was with a wrong clicker at an event. No, it all started when I was in Mexico City working for Fuckup Nights. I was living in this very intense city. I love my work, but I'm from an island, Mallorca. I like surfing. I like being in front of the water. And it was like a big struggle for me to be that far away and that difficult to go to the beach for a weekend. That I came to an agreement with my ex-wife, with my daughter, and with the founders of Fuckup Nights, that I would move to Ixtapa-Zihuatanejo, which is a place in the Pacific coast where I went a lot to spend time. I had some friends, so I could remotely work from there. And then everyone then got on a flight to Mexico City. So everyone said yes. I was like, wow, that looks super cool. And we moved there. We saved, we arranged stuff, we arranged removaling, we bought a car for it because we didn't need a car in Mexico City, etc. And we arrived there, and the night that we arrived, we kind of slept. The next day, we put our, like the furniture van arrived, we put all our furniture in our place, like we felt like home, like in front of it was like an extremely nice apartment. And we went to do some grocery shopping, and when we came back, I just like grabbed some clothes, my ex-wife grabbed my daughter, she went upstairs, and I forgot that we had a bag at the car, and was like, fuck it, really, like, it's been such an intense day, let's just chill. But then I thought, you know what? They were beers. I had a bag of beers there that I could actually use. So went back to the car, grabbed the beers, and I had a gun in my head. So, a gun. So they basically kidnapped me. They put me inside my car. They went around driving, asking how much my life was worth. And I was like, at the beginning, like for the first 15 minutes, I was like, this is a joke with bad taste, come on. But then they started hitting me and stuff, so I realized, that's a very bad joke, come on, man. So it wasn't a very nice experience. Then I had to walk barefoot for 2 hours, go back to a petrol station. They stole my money, they took my credit cards, they stole my car and everything. And should we stay here? Probably not. We had an opportunity to live in Spain, in Mallorca, so me, my partner, my wife, and my daughter, we came to Mallorca. And I met this guy, which is Joaquin, is a good friend of mine. We grew up together. And I knew he had been working on a startup related to boats. And I had an idea of kind of doing something related to charters in the Balearic Islands because it's a huge business. So we got together and we said, why don't we just organize the booking.com or Airbnb for boats? It's not the newest idea in the world, but there's not a heavy presence for that here. And we give 10% of our profit to the conservation of the Mediterranean because these kinds of industries, if they're not well done, they damage our home. So we got together, he's a super nice professional. And we kind of spent some time, we got some help, we designed the web, we designed the app. Everything was working very good. The numbers actually surprised us a lot. We had a very nice number of conversion rate. We were getting good on sales. The revenue was quite decent. Really, our expenses were very little. And with a very minimum budget of marketing, we could have a massive return of investment. So wow, that's amazing. Then not always goes extremely well. When we were at that stage, we were invited to give to an investor's pitch to receive funds for our startup. And we gave all the pitch and everything, and they asked us, okay, how money do you guys want? And we said, we don't want your money because we're still starting and it's going very well. And really, we don't want to sell a big chunk of the cake for this amount of money, etc. Probably smart, probably wrong. But in fact, we started having problems. The first one was that, well, you can't see actually, but the first problem was behind is that Posidonia project we had, which was donating 10% of our profit to the conservation of the Mediterranean, which was very nice, and we were actually buying meter squares of this algae so no one could put their anchors there, etc. And towards of making people conscious about how dangerous it is to damage this algae because it's the lung of the Mediterranean. But we didn't donate 10% of the profit, we did donate 10% of the revenue and before taxes. So it was, Posidonia, the algae, is very happy. We weren't that happy at that time. We were pretty much broke. And I was personally broke as well because at the same time I was going through a very heavy divorce process, and I'm still am, with shared custody with my daughter. And this is part of the paperwork because this photo was taken a year ago that I had to go through, to write, etc. So I was basically investing shitloads amount of money on lawyers, a lot of time on reading and writing all these documents, a lot of time on Sailero that wasn't working very well at that time, a lot of time in Fuckup nights. I was director of Fuckup nights, and my bank account looked like this. This is a literal screenshot. I don't know if there's a date here, but that was literally the first week of the month after getting paid, and I was already in minus 248 euros. And I had to invest a lot of money in the company. I had to invest a lot of money in getting married, in getting divorced, not getting married again, no, please. And I had a full-time job and a daughter with a shared custody that I was actually failing at giving the attention she deserved. And if that wasn't enough, we had an antivirus. And this is how the antiviruses work. So basically, in high season, when we were about to make up for the season equally, without earning money, but without spending money, we got a virus that fucked up all the website from scratch that we've spent like maybe 8 months working on. So I needed to invest more money, more time, and I was just not ready for it. So I basically had a quick chat with my friend, and I sold like my part of the company for let's say a decent amount of money. It wasn't even like the amount of money we invested in. And it's been like interesting experience because I was about to continue fighting just because the company keeps running and it's working, and I truly believed in the project and I really wanted to make it work, until I had that breakdown, which was like, I don't even have a weekend. I'm not able to work for Fuckup Nights well. I'm not doing like good management. I'm not doing good for Sailero. I'm not doing good for my daughter, for anything. So I took the decision to just let it go and support with my heart. And that was like the experience I had the last 2 years.